Um, Water first. Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I'm sorry, Zoom people, I can't see you. And I don't know if you can see me either. Um, I'll turn on my camera and wave for a minute, but I'm standing, so it's just gonna be like, yeah. Um, I'm Sammy, and this is an intro to game audio. And so just a really quick about me. I am a CS Games junior. I have a game audio minor, and I come from a marching and classical percussion background. So that is basically what propelled me to get into sound design and game audio. You can kind of see the conjunction of being a CS Games major and coming from a music background. Kind of destined to end up here. But more important than who I am, what I've done and what I know is a lot more important to you guys. And I am a technical sound designer and audio programmer. Uh, I've done some work on some games last year, Blue Bow and Last Broadcast. You can also see my intermediate game, and you can see real pictures of me at work, um, and the nightmare that your desktop becomes working in game audio. Um, and just like a little bit of extra about me, I'm gonna play this twice, so that everyone can hear it. Actually, I'm gonna put this in the Zoom chat so you guys can watch along. Um, and then I'll play it live here. You might want to mute the Zoom. I'll mute myself actually as it's playing, so you guys don't get double audio. Make sure I'm playing on the right thing. Oh, I didn't mute myself there, so I'm sorry if you guys heard double audio. That is my game audio reel. That's kind of my body of work. That's how you present your work in the game audio world. But very likely that didn't explain a lot in terms of what is game audio. No. That just was kind of a video with sounds. And so here is in a graphic everything that is game audio. As you can see, this is a lot of things. There is creating assets, recording, editing, doing all these different things. You can see all the different job titles and roles, all this different crazy stuff. Um, but you're probably saying, one, because the screen is probably very small, uh, Sammy, that's a ton of text. I can't read that. What is it actually? Explain it to me in like less words. This is what you do in game audio. There's basically three things that you do in game audio. You make assets, you compose music, and you put them in the game. That is everything that game audio is. It is the sound of video games. There's a lot that goes into these three things, but more or less, you make sounds, they go in the game. And there are three major jobs that are basically covering the majority of this. You can see in this giant one here, you can see there's kind of more individual things like editing and recording and testing and all this different stuff. Really, it just falls into these three categories here, with kind of an extra added category of leadership and production that you see in everything. But the three main jobs that I'm going to talk about today cover the three roles that you will probably find yourself in if you want to go work on a project, and that is sound designers, composers, and audio programmers. You've probably heard two out of three of these. You've maybe heard the third, and you can probably infer what the third one is. But I'm going to talk basically, what are these three? What's the distinction? What do they specifically do? And how do you get started working as any of these three? We're going to start with sound design because it is, in my opinion, even though everyone thinks of game audio, they always think of music. They always think about the music from their favorite video games. The biggest part of game audio, where the most people work, is in sound design. Sound design has its own process. These all basically have their own processes. And we'll kind of step through the process here. And if we have time at the end, we will do a little bit of the sound design process for ourselves together. Basically, these first two things, you can flip the order. At the start of every game, you make an asset list and you write documents that describe your vision. This is something that art departments do, that engineering departments do. Everybody does it. You just do it for sound. And basically, you just write down everything you need. That's more or less the one sheets and the asset lists. Then, once you have these things, you make the designs. You have to actually go out, record sounds, create sounds in DAWs, do all sorts of different things to modify those sounds to make the designs that you put in the game, which is the implementation phase, which is it's got to go in the game. It's got to trigger when you step on the ground, the sound has to happen. Someone has to program that to happen. And as time goes on more and more, that's falling more and more to the audio departments and not the engineers. And finally, something that applies to asset lists, one sheets, design, and implementation is sound design is a creative process, which means revision is the heart of it. You will make a sound, you will revise that sound. You'll put the sound in the game, you'll revise how it was put in the game. You might even go back and revise the sound, then put it back in the game, and then revise how it was put in the game again. There's lots and lots of revisions and iterations to make the best sounding games. And what I have linked here for anyone who looks at the slide deck afterwards is league frequencies, which basically details from start to end how Riot Games makes their sound, their voiceover, and their music. And if you are interested in audio development, I cannot recommend watching this YouTube series enough. It's going to try and play. We're going to skip past it. And we're going to look at audio asset lists. These are not great screenshots. You can't perfectly see everything, especially if you're on Zoom. But more or less, you can organize them into different categories, and you basically list every single possible sound that could happen in your game. You give it a name, so you know what the sound is. You give it how it is connected to the game, how it's going to be implemented. And then there's all sorts of other things that you can use, like tracking the status of, is it done? Has someone made it? Who's making it? Should it be a looping sound or a sound that fires only once? And then other things like how should it be positioned in the game, as well as on this sheet here, we actually have some more detailed WISE implementation stuff. And basically, asset sheets like this are your friend because, as you can see, you need to make a lot of sounds, and you got to keep track that you've made all those sounds and put them in the game. When you actually start working to make these sounds, though, you need direction. Just like how there is an art Bible and a design Bible, in audio, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. You can have audio vision docs. Personally, I am partial to something that Riot uses. I steal a lot of things from Riot because it's on the internet. They use one sheets. One sheets are basically, the idea is on a single slide, on a single piece of paper, you can put all the information you need to design sound for this character. So you can see that we have audio pillars for Pike, the high ticket areas of things we really want to hit for this character, and things like the sound palette. So we know, all right, we want to pull from these sounds. This is how we want the player to feel. Here's a couple of big boxes that we want to tick in our designs. And then you can also see a really big part of audio one sheets is having concept art of the characters, because knowing what the character looks like and how the character is supposed to feel dictates how the sound should feel and be. And I have another example here. This is from a game that I'm currently working on. You can see we have a bunch of concept art of the character. We have the high ticket areas of things we want to hit, the challenges of what do we think is going to be difficult about this sound and what should we address before we even make it. And then we have obviously the sound palette of basically the different sounds we're going to put into the sound design, and our magic audio pillars, which is just a general, like, who is this character? Tell us about them so we can design something that's similar to them. And since we are talking about design, let's go into that design process. And I really like this comparison of there are two parts of sound design. There is thematic readability, which is, does this feel like the character? Does this fit the aesthetics of the game? And gameplay readability, which is, does this fit the mechanics of the game? And you're basically trying to achieve both of these things in harmony to create a cohesive sound. I think an excellent example of this is I'm going to play you guys two videos of Lulu, a champion from League of Legends, with two different skins. So the first skin, I'm going to play this to our in-person people first, and then I will play it online as well. Let's hope that I can reconnect to this audio here. And so you can see, I'm going to play it again for hopefully our Zoom people. Play it one more time. So you can see we have like a cute kind of bee-themed Lulu skin. This one on the right here. And so when you're going for the thematic elements of this character, you want something cute and whimsical. But if we look at like the actual ability itself, you can see there's distinctly like two projectiles and they kind of spin. So in the gameplay, we want to communicate there's more than one thing flying at the player. And I think this skin in this design does a really great job of that. You can hear distinctly, I'm going to switch it back for our in-person people. You can hear in the fire sound, you can hear distinctly kind of a whoosh whoosh, where you can hear both projectiles going. Oh, shoot. Okay, there we go. Get back to full screen. And you can hear basically two parts of that fire sound, kind of communicating that there's two projectiles being thrown. I'm going to really quickly go to the other skin, which I've chosen, I believe, a fire tamer skin. And you can hear there's still that same core gameplay readability of that whoosh whoosh sound, but instead of kind of sounding so cutesy, you can hear a little bit of smoldering smoke in the designs, which kind of is conveying the more thematic aspects of this is a dragon instead of a cute bee maid girl. I think that's what this is. And so I'm going to play this for our Zoom people so they can hear those differences. This is essentially the big thing that we're trying to do in sound design is communicate to the player what an ability does with our sounds, whether it's good or bad. You can hear it in the sound as they fire it once, not hitting the target, and the second time hitting it, there's a sound that communicates they're hitting the target. And then you also want to communicate kind of the gameplay fantasy of these characters. And we'll take a step forward of we've made these really, really beautiful sound designs. We need to put them in the game somehow. Whose job is that? Skip through these. Sorry, we're not going to skip to that. We're going to skip to how to do this. Sound design, in my opinion, is really, really, really incredible because there is no barrier to entry. Ableton, Pro Tools are common programs that a lot of people use, but you can also use Reaper and Audacity, which are 100% free. And generally, no one cares what you use. You don't need to use the same tools as everyone else on your team. You can use what you prefer, which means if you prefer not spending money, you cannot spend money. I personally use Reaper for just about everything I work on. And the other nice thing is that there are tons and tons of free plugins that you can use as replacements for all these expensive paid for options that cost like hundreds of dollars. You don't need these to create sound design. And the other very nice thing is that you can create incredible sounding sound design without having to pay for it in the same way as composition. You don't need really, really nice sounding instruments to make good sound design. In the same way you might need really, really nice MIDI patches for good composition. And there's also another nice barrier of entry that, in my opinion, it's much easier to start making sound design and get something done than it is to write a song for the first time because there's so much theory and stuff that goes into it. And I think we'll likely have time here. We'll together make a sound. We'll actually do a sound redesign for one of the Lulu skins here. And we'll show off basically that everything you can do it for free and you can do it fast. And you can do it. Like, I believe in you. But there is this thing that you have to do after you make. It's annoying that it's blocking that. I'm going to move it. You have to get the sounds into the game. Whose job is that? Previously, a long time ago, this was not a sound department's job. It was the engineering department was supposed to get a list of sounds and put them into the game. However, sound implementation has gotten drastically more complicated because sound designers and composers have dreamed up more and more complicated systems they want to put in the game, which has created a new role, technical sound design. What is technical sound design? How is it different from sound design? Unfortunately, it's a very new role, so it is different at every single company. Technical, in my opinion, implies that you will work in some way with implementation. In modern times, that means you're probably touching Unreal Meta Sounds, working in Fmod, or working in Wise. Fmod and Wise are two different middlewares. Middlewares are basically extra programs that you can package into your game, usually used for Unity, but also Unreal. Basically, they give you lots of built-in sound options and provide easier ways to implement your sounds in more complex ways to do it. Really not something I'm going to cover a lot of today because this is an introduction to game audio, and those are something that like take some learning, and they're very specific to each thing. And I have this tidbit here that audio programmers and engineers sometimes do the implementation, but I would say a technical sound designer's job in terms of implementation goes up to the point where they have to touch code. And the second they have to touch code, a company will say an engineer needs to do that. And that is pretty typical of most companies, I would say. Which leads us into audio programming. We know a little bit about them. They maybe implement sound sometimes, but what's the difference between them and a technical sound designer? Well, audio programmers, as you can see, we're back with the middleware. Audio programmers are responsible for maintaining middleware implementations and writing the middleware. Sometimes they're responsible for implementing sounds into the game. They are also responsible for any complex audio systems. Like, for example, if you want to sync all of your sounds to the music, that is a system that your audio programmers would write, and then your technical sound designers would use to implement. Additionally, if you're doing fun things like keying things to the different key changes, chord changes of the music, that's a system an audio programmer would write. And finally, where a lot of audio programmers work is on the actual audio engines themselves, which means they are working at a very low level, basically working to take sound files and give them to the OS to be loaded, basically creating the audio buffers. This is where it becomes very, very highly technical, and almost outside of the game audio world because it becomes engine programming world. But for most intents purposes, I would say that audio programmers are one of the most broad job descriptions in the same way that technical sound designers are, where you could be doing very high level stuff in middleware or very, very low level stuff in like C writing stuff for the OS. But let's just really specifically break down the difference between the two. The biggest one is an audio programmer writes code. A technical sound designer does not, generally. And an audio programmer does not make any sounds. They don't have design in their name. So unfortunately, if you want to be an audio programmer, it means you're likely not going to make any sound designs for the project. And you can see again there, echoing, audio programmers often work on audio engines. Who would have guessed? And finally, we jumped out of order to talk about composition last. There's a very specific reason I'm talking about composition last, and that is because composition in games is really hard. There are so many incredibly talented composers, and there is typically only one composer per game. And studios, if we looked way back at the chart at the beginning, very, very infrequently do studios have a composer on their payroll 12 months of the year. They're usually contract work. But I don't mean to discourage you from becoming a composer, so I very much wanted to include the realities of how you can be a composer. I'm also just going off the assumption that everyone can guess that a composer writes music for games. In this slide here, I wanted to cover, in this next slide, I wanted to cover the other things that composers do in games. You can learn technical skills. You can learn how to implement things in Wise to differentiate yourself from other kinds of composers. And you can learn about music editing and being a game composer. Being a game composer includes this: layers, loops, and dynamism. That's a fun word. So the biggest difference between composing for film and games is that games are dynamic. You interact with games. Games are inherently an interactive media. And so the music that you write for games inherently has to be interactive. The typical ways that we do this, going back many, many years, is we write loops because we don't know how long the player will be on a certain stage. And now that we've kind of gotten to the 21st century and we have a lot more technology, we have more sound possible on these games, we've started doing things like layers and interactive music. This is a really great chart, I think, showing how layers work. Essentially, in a layer, you have several different segments of music that you play at the same time that kind of stack on top of themselves. Like, for example, you might have like an orchestra and the violins are in their own separate layer in the game. And unless the spark is super close to the rift, like for instance here, you can see until it gets this close to the rift, we won't hear the violins, for example, if they were layer 4. And basically what this does is it lets us have changing intensities in the music that reacts dynamically to the gameplay. There's also other crazy stuff you can do with this, going as far as like being incredibly granular in terms of stingers, which are little segments of music that play keyed to certain events. There's so much stuff you can do to basically create a musical out of your video game. And that is where game composers differentiate themselves from film composers. And because there's this difference between film composers and game composers, there is a really interesting job that if you're interested in film composition and you want to be more technical and making interactive systems really interests you, there is a job called music editors. What do music editors do? Typically, a game will hire a composer. This is very specific to like God of War, but what will happen with music editors is a composer will write this huge, giant, long, linear piece of music. You can't just take this piece of music and put it on the game because it won't sync up with the game. You'll just have like, you'll be listening to a movie soundtrack while you're playing the game. What a music editor does is they take this music and they cut it into pieces and they edit it and they basically say, this would make a good transition. This would make a good loop. And they go through this giant soundtrack essentially and turn it into small interactive pieces and implement it into the game. They basically, um, their job basically is teaching the game how to conduct this giant soundtrack in accordance with the gameplay. And I think music editing is super, super cool. And it's also very awesome if you have an interest in just music because in composition, because it is a skill that not everyone has. And it's a very unique way to differentiate yourself. And often it lets you have a lot of creative output without having to compete as heavily for those individual composition jobs. And you get to just work with a lot of really awesome like composers as well. And I believe here we're ready to get started. Um, kind of covered the three different roles: sound design, audio programming, and composition. The big question is, okay, I get it. This is what you do in game audio. How do I get started? How do I do it? How do I learn this? The answer is to just do it. And very obviously, you're going to ask, how? Best way to learn anything in games is to start working on game jams. Basically 24 to 48 hours to make a game. Make a game in a weekend. The quality of the game doesn't really matter. It's the learning. You can also, here at USC, you can volunteer on MFA projects, or if you're feeling very risque, AGPs. Because a little secret about USC is there's not a lot of audio people here, which means especially if you learn how to implement things into the games, which is something that even fewer people at USC know how to do, you are a wanted resource. People will go out of their way to recruit you onto games. Um, and basically learning these skills and working on a single project is a great way to get a reputation, and a reputation at USC goes a long way. I can guarantee if you volunteer on a game and you go up to any MFA, especially coming April when they're recruiting, and you say, "Hi, I want to implement sounds on your game and make sounds," they will say, "Yes, thank you, please." Um, However, though, game jams and MFA projects do require social interaction, and if you aren't feeling confident or up to it, if you're like very, very much starting off in composition or sound design or like implementation, and you don't want the pressure of a team, you can do like what we're going to do in a minute here: sound redesigns and personal projects. Sound redesigns are basically two things. You can do them on linear media, like we're going to do. You can just download a video of a cutscene in a video game you like, or a small portion of gameplay, open it up in your DAW, and put sounds over it. Mute the original audio and replace it with your own audio that you create. And then I put personal projects here, meaning specifically you can do the exact same thing by downloading a basic Unity game and adding sounds to it. I believe also, if I'm not mistaken, the entirety of Celeste, the Fmod project for Celeste, is available for download. So you can sound redesign Celeste using Fmod, which is kind of incredible. And I believe there are tutorials explaining exactly how those systems and stuff work. So let me check how much time I have here. We don't have a ton of time, but let's go ahead and do it anyway.
We have the space until 6.
Okay. I'm gonna sit down because I need to use the computer now. So let's
The TMT.
Zoom share. I wanna share this now. Okay. Reaper. All right. I wonder who's gonna. We gotta put a sound in here. I just need a sound. This is just a test. Okay. I'm sorry, Zoom people. This might be silent. You just get to silently. Oh shoot! What did I do? Okay. So what I've done here for us. All right. Here we go. I'm gonna get rid of that for a second. Okay, we're gonna do a sound redesign on specifically that first little cute, those are cupcakes. Um, on that first cute clip of the Lulu skin. And so basically the first thing that I always think about when doing a sound redesign is first, um, we should think about what our design goals should be, and what kind of palettes um, we want to use. So if anyone here has ideas of like what kind of sounds we should use, or if people want to put them in the Zoom chat, if you guys start brainstorming now, I'm going to go through and basically mark out when is there an impact, when is the ability start, when does the ability end, so we can see it in the DAW, so we can do this editing a little easier. You want to make it scary? Okay. Some crackling. Okay, that's when it disappears. And then I'm going to be ambitious and say, and actually, let's do we'll just do the first one. So I've just marked out really quickly, start of the sound, the end of the sound. So, ooh, a cupcake splat. See if I can find a good splat. So biggest thing, Reaper is a free DAW. That is the DAW I'm using right now. Soundly is also free. I might go on to SoundSnap. Like 50% of SoundSnap is free. So let's just find a splat because I really like the splat.
It's hard. It's a nightmare.
Yeah. No,
There you go. That's it. That's what we use.
I don't dislike it, so I'm gonna grab it. I want to process it. It has I like the bits of it. Like, so we're gonna do some every plugin. I will call out if I use a plugin that costs money. I don't think I own any that cost money, so we should be okay. So I'm gonna just do a couple things to this because I like the like transient of this, but I dislike how like mouth soundy it is. Okay, we don't need the reverb on it right now. I want to like get rid of the like there. Um, and then I want to pitch it up.
Can you do share full screen?
Yes.
Oh no, that can be seen, but just.
Okay. Let me do that. Okay, so um, do I want to pitch it down? Oh, now I've lost our audio. I'm gonna get it back.
Oh, look at this mouth part.
Yeah, it literally the things you'll find. I don't actually dislike it. Um, I think what I want to do is make this project. This project is so large. Um, it's hard to move around here. We'll just stay focused on right here. Zoom out a little bit. I like it. I want to put some reverb on it. I want like what? It makes it sound like it's in a big room, and I'm actually kind of don't want to put reverb on this because I think I know what it will sound like with reverb. So I'm going to I want to fully mix it to the reverb. That's so impactful. I want to like cut out a lot of this. Okay. So we have this sound in here. Um, what else do we want? We want some like fizzles. I'm gonna find some fizzles on my computer. Uh, these are all sounds that I've made um using sound particles, which is a fun free tool for students. I like the beginning of that, so we're gonna use it. Let's find something here. Yes. What? You wanted horror? So let's just throw these somewhere.
I can tell someone did it with their mouth. This is a real one.
You can get a good chunk of sounds off SoundSnap for free. I believe in all the intermediate classes they give you a SoundSnap code. And they used to give SoundSnap codes.
We're gonna do questions at the end.
Yes.
Focus on, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That one at least like we're replacing it with this one. It's muted, that's why. And then I want to like make it really big. I don't want small and wide. I want like I'm gonna solo it out. Not that big. Really not that big. We're gonna use a different reverb plugin. Um, there we go. And we want to sync that up to the end here. I actually kind of like it at the beginning and then put some big reverb on it. There we go.
Yes, you're still 550.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna move a couple of these over and then that was not nothing. So that is just this is like 5 minutes of work here in let's make these actually line up in a way that makes sense. This is like 5 minutes of work here in Reaper. It doesn't sound great, be honest. Uh, but you can see that like this is how kind of the sound design process goes. It's layering in lots of sounds and putting all sorts of different plugins on them. I do want to use any time that we have left for questions. And for my little, if I have a little soapbox on the end here for if you're interested in learning more about sound, I think the best resource here at USC, this is the USC Games audio Discord or the USC Game audio Discord. which is a relatively large community of game audio people here at USC. It's relatively inactive, but certainly if you ask a question, you will get an answer that will be pretty helpful. There's just a lot of really awesome game audio people here at USC. And so I don't think I have a question slide. I will leave this and my contact info up.
The question is, as an audio guy, do you ever have so much miscellaneous sounds that you run out of space on all your drives? And if so, how do you deal with that?
So I have a 2 terabyte hard drive or two terabyte solid state on this Mac. I've used up about half of it. I also have a separate solid state drive that is just sounds. I think this is a very, very common practice is basically you end up with a lot of sounds. And the biggest thing is you need to find good like library software in terms of like indexing and finding your files. And I cannot recommend enough buying they're relatively cheap now, um, solid state external hard drives. Super, super useful. I think I have one that has a full like terabyte of sounds on it. Um, it can be clunky to use, but if you like make sure to use, there's lots of different variants of software that basically you can search up and it'll pull up tags of your different files. That's the sort of thing that I would recommend if you're kind of running out of space on your computer. I personally, I can see the Zoom chat here, so I'm going to respond. I personally, I think I have a Zoom H5. I have God knows how many recordings on my phone as well. I think everyone has their own sound design process. I personally am a big fan of like pulling from SoundSnap and from doing synthesis on my own using different synths and then putting in things like I think it's Tonstroom Whoosh and um there's another similar one to it that's really fun. I've not ever gone to a CD store to find pre-recorded samples. And I've definitely like for some specific things, going out in the field and like grabbing your personal recorder and like either going like or renting out like a Foley room is the thing that you need. But I think that at this point, um, almost every sound someone's recorded and it's on the internet and you can get it. Sometimes it costs money. I generally don't pay for sounds off the internet. Um, but I would say that like diversifying where you get your sounds from makes you sound unique. Yeah.
I know SEA has Foley rooms.
Yes. I've used them once. I think actually the picture that has Daniel in it, all the way at the very beginning. Um, oop, this is me in SEA's Foley room. Um, actually booking them is a little weird, and I'm not entirely sure how to do it. Um, I know that SEA's facilities tend to be a little restrictive. But generally, I think if you are working on like a capstone project at USC, like an MFA, like the Masters of Fine Arts projects, or on the AGP capstones, which is the other like USC games like capstone for all the undergrads. Um, those games, I think they do try to give access to the Foley rooms for, but in terms of general access, I I don't know if they really do it. Um, SEA tends to be very protective of their stuff because it's expensive. However, um, a closet with some blankets and towels works just as well. The only thing is you might not have the same degree of stuff in your apartment, like the same amount of shoes, basically. Any other final questions? And then just overall, because I think we're waiting on like one more question. Um, okay, good. I thought I lost Zoom for a second. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. That is my email. And then that is also my Discord. Um, please feel free to reach out if you're interested in working on these projects and you don't know where they are or like how to get started. Um, definitely reach out or join like the game audio server. There's a lot of people there to kind of help you get started because I think everyone in that server loves game audio and would love for there to be like one more person in it since it's such a small group of people here. Um, so you do a lot of sound layering. Do you ever find a specific sound you really like that requires you to strip away certain elements like background noise or some frequencies? What's your process for that? What plugins do you use, if any? I personally, we're gonna see if this breaks everything with Reaper. Trying to go back to Reaper. Um, is it showing my screen with Reaper? Um, okay. I personally, most of the time, I find um just using an EQ perfectly fine for it. I basically usually want like just the high end or just the low end or just this middle section of frequencies. I usually use Reaper for that. If I recorded something like with like a personal recorder, it's like a recording. If I'm getting like feedback or background noise, I believe it's Refer. Um, there is a subtract mode, and you can basically this plugin, it's built in with Reaper, 100% free. You basically just record a sound profile and then it does subtractive editing that usually just cancels out that background noise. I love doing it for voiceover stuff. Um, hopefully that helps in terms of like ways to get rid of background noise. Background noise, I think I use Refer. I can assure you there's probably 10 plugins that you can buy or that are free that are designed solely to remove background noise that will work to varying degrees. Yeah. Um,
We, yeah, we're at like a bit.
Yeah.
So.
we're at the end of our time here. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. Thanks, y'all, for coming online.
Oh, wait, that's, I changed my background.